Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to introduce to you a dear friend of the show and a dear friend of Palestine, another Australian Palestinian, Mr. Khalid. How are you, Khalid?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me, Nasser.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Khalid. You're the next generation of Palestinian, and we're going to get into your story and where you're heading and what you've done. But first, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, every Palestinian has come to Australian diaspora as a refugee and has a unique story. Can you share with our listeners your story?
Sure. Well, I was born to a Palestinian father and an Australian mother, and I was born in Dubai in the Emirates, and we came to Australia when I was about 4 years old, with my whole family, with my brother and sister, and we came to Brisbane first, to Queensland, and that's where my mother's side of the family is, and so we were close to them and grew up sort of between there and another Queensland town, Toowoomba. So we were there for many years and mainly grew up there. Then again, we were between Australia and the Emirates, where my father eventually went back to work. So working in Australia was pretty difficult for someone of his background, especially at that time, especially sort of immediately following September 11, coming to Australia and, not being a native English speaker and being Arab was challenging, to say the least, especially in that sort of environment where we were and a bit far away from any sort of community that was familiar. And I didn't probably understand that very much, being as little as I was, but I came to know more about that as I grew up. But that was pretty hard for my father. So he eventually went back to the Emirates for work and has been there for many years now. So we've sort of been between here and there, split up, but also always together. So that's sort of been the story of my upbringing, I guess. And
so that's not unique for a Palestinian to be split up but together. Often the reality is that some Palestinians, whether they're in 48, their mother or father is a 48 PAL, the other partner is a 67 PAL, or perhaps a resident of Jerusalem or Gaza or even outside of Palestine. So the disconnection but connection is something that not unique perhaps to Palestinians, but very much a part of the Palestinian story. So your dad's still there, mum's here, mum's recently gone back.
That's right, yeah. So we're always sort of coming and going and, changing our situation according to our different conditions and what works for us at the time. So like you say, at the moment, both my dad and my mum's there, and my brother as well. So it's just me and my sister here.
Tell us about your Palestine experience in Australia. So you're in Pauline Hanson territory in FNQ.
Yeah.
As white as white bread might be. You're fair-ish, but not fair. Obviously Middle Eastern in appearance and, fit the stereotype. We're not going to let you learn how to fly an aeroplane.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up with a funny name and funny religion?
Well, I'm sure very similar to other people's experience, but like you say, I was in a particularly isolated place, I suppose, isolated from any sort of Arab or Palestinian community. So yeah, that was challenging, and as I mentioned before as well, gets more challenging as you get older and you sort of want to discover your identity more, or naturally to some extent start discovering your identity. And it was hard. I was in schools as well with very little diversity, I suppose, as far as people from other cultures or of cultures that are familiar to me, familiar to my family. So I think that it's had a huge effect on my upbringing and on the decisions that I've made sort of throughout the later stages of school and following school. I think to some extent even more so than my siblings struggled with growing up here later on, because I was sort of very attached to that side of my identity and found it difficult growing up in an environment where I had challenges discovering it and was very distant from any sort of feeling of that Palestinian Arab identity. But that's, over time that's really improved, because I think in many ways it's improved because of my better understanding of Australia and Australia's story, and knowing that I don't have at least any less right than any other person in Australia to be here and to express myself as my unique Arab and Palestinian self, because of course Australia has a very similar story to Palestine in that its people have experienced very similar things to.
Well, the parallels, Khalid, are absolutely 100% the same. We're a settler colonialist society that's predicated on dispossession, annihilation of an indigenous culture.
Yeah.
And you're right. Your right to be an Australian in here is no less or greater than anybody else's, but certainly it should be secondary to our First Nations people. Khalid, how have you along that journey expressed or found a way to express your Palestinianness? Is there a seminal moment? What was as a kid growing up, I can almost pinpoint the days, weeks when I would say Palestine and they would say Pakistan, and I'd say Palestine and they knew it was Palestine. And for me, it was coming into Oslo in 88 to 93. It sort of changed a little bit. Palestine was in the media. There was peace talks. That was before you were born.
Yeah.
What's that moment for you?
So I think all the time that I was growing up here, and like I say, most of that was in a regional town in Queensland, in Toowoomba. I don't think Palestine ever really came up until sort of much later on, possibly in high school. And before that as well, I sort of, as I mentioned before, grew up with my father overseas and my mother very busy at work, trying to look after us three kids. And often there was very little time to be exploring these things. And I think with the nature of half of my family being in Jordan, I almost grew up thinking of myself as Jordanian and not knowing much about Palestine until I sort of understood the difference and understood the unique elements of that identity and began to discover them almost on my own, but of course with the constant support of my family. And so I think it was probably in about grade 8, I was probably about 13 when I really understood that I was Palestinian, and in some ways that's when it got harder, I suppose, and I felt more isolated here in Australia. But at the same time, it was a great time because, I was able to understand that and to explore my identity. And I think from that day on, I sort of spent every day, every lunch at school, going to the library and just finding any book where I could find the word Palestine and reading. So, yeah, I think I was also I never understood the idea of being ashamed of identity, and I always just saw there was in it to be proud of, and so I suppose that in some ways that's how it was part of my life from that stage on. That any friends that I did have or any relationships with teachers that I did have, I was never afraid to share and talk about that with them, even though, of course, as you asked me before about the challenges of living in a place like where I was, is that if people aren't ignorant of it, they are often sort of not very, very supportive.
No, agnostic, yeah. So you're a university student now, a young man. What does being Palestinian mean to you? How does it express itself from your identity?
I think at this stage it's changed significantly because of course I'm as proud as ever to be Palestinian, and it's something very personal to me, but also collective, as you know, that being Palestinian and the Palestinian struggle is a collective struggle. But I suppose, like you're asking, being Palestinian in Australia is almost another thing. I think what it means to me now is understanding, as we talked about before, understanding the links between my story as a Palestinian and the story of Palestinians in general, understanding the links between that and the story of Australia's peoples, and sort of figuring out what my place is as a Palestinian here and what my responsibilities are. So, on one hand, I think that I'm always free to express my Palestinian identity and to advocate for Palestine and to seek solidarity from others, solidarity for my cause. I also need to be always conscious of my responsibilities to the people of Australia, and by that I mean, of course, the Aboriginal people of Australia.
Awesome.
And almost in a way putting them first as long as I am in Australia, as I would expect of anybody if I had my right as a Palestinian to be home in Palestine.
That's beautiful, Khalid. Thank you. We haven't actually spoken about your father and his journey. So you said most of your family is in Jordan, as we know. In fact, probably half of the Palestinians on earth are in Jordan. How did they end up there? What's his story?
Well, again, probably like a lot of other Palestinians in Jordan, but my family is originally from Al-Khalil, from Hebron, from an outer part of Al-Khalil, from a town called Dura, from a village in Dura. And so obviously that part of Palestine, what's now in the West Bank, was part of Jordan before 1967. And so people were basically coming and going between what's now called Jordan and the West Bank. And so there weren't really any borders, and people just were, like I say, coming and going. And so I think nobody could really predict that in 67 what happened was going to happen, and that anybody that wasn't on their land at the time was not going to go back. So that's in the simplest way I could explain it. That's what happened. And
just on the wrong side of the armistice line at the conclusion of the war, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, of superficial borders that divide people who shouldn't be divided.
Yeah, and land that shouldn't be divided.
Yeah, exactly.
So have you been to Palestine?
No, I have not. No. Yes, it's it's a difficult topic to think about and talk about, but I go to Jordan. I visit my family there, even though I haven't been in a while. The difficulties of traveling, of course, and we have also talked as a family about, trying to go for the day to Al-Quds, to Jerusalem. But yeah, it's never worked out, and it's something that I keep looking forward to.
Has it been a logistics thing, a time thing, a money thing? I mean, the reality is you're an Australian citizen with an Australian passport, as is your mother. I presume your father, is he an Australian?
Yes, yep. Yeah.
You should.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, so I suppose it's all of those things. And, when I go to Jordan, it's about going to visit my family. Of course, all of my family are Jordanian citizens and don't go to Palestine and would face a lot of difficulty going to Palestine.
Of course, yeah, impossible for them.
Yep. So yeah, like I say, it's been considered and it's been a possibility. But the more the years go by, the more I think as much as I'd like to be active in advocacy here and in other places, I feel it sort of also lessens my chances of being able to be there and be there without sort of the persecution of.
The Israelis run a program called the Birthright Tour, and they pay for young Jewish kids all over the world to fly back, and they sponsor some trips, and some of them are for free. And they do it. Reality, a part of an indoctrination and a connection to Israel. I've been, I think, 6 times, Khalid.
Yeah.
And I'm an Australian, yeah. I look like them, but I sound like us, and it depends who's actually saying that, whether it's an Australian saying it or an Israeli, yeah?
Yeah.
So I encourage all of our young Palestinians to, even if you get rejected, that in and of itself is an act of protest.
Yeah.
So we actively encourage all of our listeners and any other Palestinians, young Palestinians, to go and claim their right. There's a Palestinian group called KTH, Know Thy Heritage, that run programs like the Birthright, obviously in more normal times and not Corona times. So I might connect you up with them. So let's talk about activism now. Where do you see? I know you've just joined a group and you've started a group called Free Palestine Melbourne. You've been part of the organising committee there. Tell us a bit about that and where you see yourself and it.
Well, I was more or less connected to it by others. I wasn't around at the very beginnings of it at the end of last year, but I was very happy to join the second meeting and like you say, take part in organising things and in starting it up with the others that are involved. And it seems like we've done well so far and are looking to do more and more. We've got a really good group of people, and it's sort of a smaller community-based group that hopefully sort of fills a bit of a gap in Melbourne. Obviously, there's so much good work being done in Melbourne, and a number of groups and organisations. But I think the idea behind this one was that we'd have a sort of broad-reaching group that covers all types of activism and involves all people, and is sort of engaged in the kind of daily advocacy and event organising that people from all over, Kulin Nations land, Melbourne, and even broader, possibly in the future, can take part in and easily participate in. Something hopefully that will reach out to as many people as possible and be open to all.
And so how would people connect with Free Palestine Melbourne?
Well, we have recently started our media platforms. So we've got our Facebook page, Free Palestine Melbourne, and on that page is our website, and we can be contacted that way or by the email that's on that page. So we've got posts going up every day on there, and all our events will be on there as well. We're at the moment not shying away from the events because of the conditions. We're trying to do things online, and hopefully looking at doing an online film screening very soon, possibly even collaborating with other groups and even outside of Australia. So hopefully it'll be a good event, a big event that anybody can take part in. And like I say about the Facebook page, anybody that goes there and sees that page will see that everything's open for all to participate, and all the details of how to join our events and meetings are there.
So that's at Free Palestine Melbourne?
Free Palestine Melbourne.
And the website is fpmelbourne.org.
fpmelbourne.org, yeah.
fpmelbourne.org, so our listeners can find you there. Now, you did have one online event already. You had a screening of a movie?
That's right, yeah. So there's a film called Gaza Fights for Freedom, and we had that film on Zoom, on a platform that lots of people are using at the moment. We had that at the end of March. The last week of March was a week of action that was called for by the Palestinian Prisoners Network. A week of action to support the Great March of Return and breaking the siege of Gaza. Yeah, we wanted to endorse that call and organise events. Unfortunately, we did have to cancel a couple of the things that we had planned, but we went ahead with the film and we showed that online. But we'd really like to show it again and give people another chance to see it and show it to a bigger audience. So that's what we're looking at doing at the moment.
Fantastic. So for our listeners again, Free Palestine Melbourne on Facebook and fpmelbourne.org. If you could share one thing, we often get listeners not sure what they should do, how they could support Palestine, a simple action for them. What do you tell lay people when they go? What can I do?
Well, I'm not sure if there is one thing that I tell anyone or that I don't get asked really, but I think, if I was to think right now, as you ask me, I think that I would just be telling people that there is so much out there for people to get involved in. Of course, that does depend on where you are and your own individual circumstances, but there is so much out there to be involved in, and we've just been talking about an example. So really, for anyone in Melbourne, in this huge city with so many people, it's really as simple as that, as joining a group like that and being on top of their media to know when they have activities and events on, and join in, learn, and listen to people, listen to Palestinians in particular, listen to Aboriginal people, and the sort of, as we talked about so much, the links between those two stories, and as much as one can, learn about Palestine. I mean, like I say, everything's available now, all the resources you can imagine, and you're definitely not just getting one narrative these days. You can expose yourself to all of them, so there's no excuse really.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Khalid.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nasser.
And that was Khalid, another young Palestinian in Australia, sharing his journey with us. So don't forget to look up Free Palestine Melbourne on Facebook or fpmelbourne.org.au. A recap on Gaza after our discussion last week with Professor Mushir. Sadly, COVID's on the rise. The Palestinians have amazingly, having suffered so much adversity, being able to manage under 72 years of brutal Israeli occupation. How they've managed to contain COVID is amazing, both within the West Bank and Gaza. In particular, though, Gaza has run out of tests. They've put out a call to the world to send more COVID tests. The Israelis have not given any more over. In Australia, Olive Kids is running a campaign to raise money to help our partners in Gaza. So if you go to olivekids.org.au, you'll be able to support that. That's olivekids.org.au. As we know, international law demands that the occupying power is responsible for the people that they occupy. There's absolutely no doubt that Gaza is occupied. It's occupied by Israel. It maintains an air, land and sea blockade. It has a responsibility to the people of Gaza to ensure that they are able to cope with this outbreak of COVID, to ensure that that population under occupation has the tools and means necessary to cope with this pandemic. The reality, as we know, 2 million Gazans trapped in 365 square kilometres with less than 70 intensive care beds and less than 100 ventilators is ill-equipped. The UN released a report many years ago. It said that Gaza would be uninhabitable by 2020. Here we are in 2020 and the Israelis are withholding aid and the necessary equipment and medical supplies that will enable the 2 million Palestinians to be able to cope with this pandemic that is gripping the whole world. No surprise to those that know the evils of the occupation, the disaster that befell the Palestinians when Zionism came in the late 19th century. A sad day indeed when 2 million people continue to get held hostage whilst the world remains silent and preoccupied with their own pain. Gaza knows what lockdown is. Rest of the world, this is Gaza 24/7, 365. The ingenuity of Palestinians, and Palestinians in Gaza in particular, has never ceased to amaze, but proving once again that necessity is the mother of invention. Palestinians in Gaza, a couple of engineers, Issam Khalaf and Ismail Sakhal, they're engineering professors at the Islamic University of Gaza. They've been working on alternative ventilators to complement the current, I think that we're saying around 56 that are in Gaza, and that are servicing 2 million people. Considering the lack of material and the Israeli restrictions, the two men have been able to put together with some sensors, air filters and some fuses to build a makeshift ventilator that will cost between $150 and $200. And when you compare that to somewhere between $5,000 and $50,000, it's really amazing. These two fantastic engineers believe they can build 100 in the next 10 days if some restrictions are removed. Let's hope and pray that that might happen. And don't forget, listeners, be sure to go to apan.org.au to check out all the latest happenings. Very excitingly, over the next, while we're all in lockdown, there's opportunities for you to engage in Palestine in a number of different ways. On the 20th of April, there's a webinar called Positive Change for Palestine, social media webinar, so you can express your interest online for that. Confronting the vulnerability of Indigenous bodies, and this is something that you really should register for and download as a podcast later. There's a great video series on BDS called United Against Racism. A video series, COVID-19 and the healthcare systems in Palestine from the Foundation for Middle East Peace. And a really good podcast called Ramblings of a Chef. Something a little lighter. Fadi Katan is a French Palestinian. He's based in Palestine, in Bethlehem, and he's created a podcast which describes connecting Palestinian cuisine with the modern world. So be sure to go to apan.org.au where you can download those podcasts and get some more information. Finally, don't forget, at apan.org.au, be sure to join the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network and add your voice to the thousands of other Australians who are advocating for Palestine. Thanks again. Be sure to listen next week. Share this podcast and remember, free Palestine.